A healthier, happier life begins here. Welcome to Mercy Moments, a podcast by Mercy Health in association with True Chat.
Did you know that West Central Ohio has a vibrant and diverse agricultural history? Or that in Champaign County alone, there are well over 900 farms, encompassing roughly 436 square miles and contributing well over $130 million to the local economy. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm the host of Mercy Moments, T. Alan Ceyler, coming to you from Champaign County here at True Chat Studios in Urbana, Ohio. My guest today is an expert on agriculture. He has worked as a research assistant at Monsanto Company and as a field agronomist for Integrated Ag Services, and is currently the ag educator for the Ohio State Extension Program. Please welcome to the program, Grant Davis. Grant, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So we always like to start out by asking our listeners to give us a little history about themselves.
Yeah. I grew up in the Christiansburg area, actually just over the county line in Miami County. So just at the very east side of Miami County there. Miami East high school graduate. Went on to go to Ohio State, got a degree in ag education. At the time, thought that I wanted to be a high school ag teacher, like Future Farmers of America, FFA, do all that kind of stuff, which I was very involved in that in my own high school career. So that's what I thought I would want to keep doing, and just never really had the opportunity. At that point in time, there weren't a lot of openings around the state, and I wanted to try and stay in the area. It just didn't work out, so never really have been in that aspect of education, of ag education, until I had the opportunity to come into Extension, and that's still considered a part of ag education, just not in a school setting, just more of a community outreach and an extension of the university.
So what made you pursue a career in agriculture?
I grew up in a farming family. My father farmed for quite a while when I was younger, and then decided to make a change and get out of it. Both of my grandfathers were involved in farming, and have an uncle that I still involved in farming with. So I kind of grew up in that aspect of it, and just growing up, never really could see myself doing anything else, I guess. You get to that point in high school that's like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to go to college for? And I really liked ag class. I really liked FFA. I liked 4-H. So I knew I wanted to do something in ag, and it was just a matter of what was I going to do. And my kind of have a line of teachers, I guess, in the family as well. So that ag education just kind of seemed to fit at the time.
Now you have your own farm, correct?
Yes, I do. I mentioned both my grandfathers farmed, and they both since passed on, but I am lucky enough to have some ground available that they had owned that's still in the family, that I'm able to get started farming and do some grain farming, and as well as beef cattle, and just direct to consumer freezer beef sales. So
I guess my first question is, what is the modern definition of a farm? And the reason why I ask this is because there seems to be, a number of hybrid or alternative use farms out there now.
Absolutely. So the definition of a farm is pretty loose, really. As far as the IRS is concerned, if you gross over $1,000 from any product that's sold, that you produced on your property, whether it be half an acre or 1,000 acres, that's considered a farm. So it's really that kind of dollar amount, and that's a gross number, not a net. So, really, if you sell one steer, you're at that $1,000 unless you're selling it really cheap, So,
that's a good point. So does the size of a farm matter in regards to what it's used for?
Not really. Again, we're kind of getting into the technicalities. To qualify for what's called CAUV, or agricultural use, basically the land, that has to be over 10 acres unless you can prove that you're making money in an agricultural product from that smaller amount. But yeah, there really isn't a technicality as far as the size of a farm to be considered a farm.
The reason why I asked that is in Champaign County, for example, there seems to be a lot of like 25 to 200 acre farms. So, but there are farms out there that are thousands of acres. So how does that change what it's used for, though?
So you mentioned earlier that there's over 900 farms in total in the county. Of that, about 640 are under 200 acres. So that's a good question. I think there is a mix in there of those smaller acreage farms are either, maybe somebody like myself, when I first was getting started with the freezer beef thing, we only had 10 acres. We decided to get some cows and start raising the steers and selling the meat. And I think that's a pretty typical story for anybody that lives in a rural environment, like in Champaign County, that, they come out and they buy a 5 or 10 acre lot. And what are we going to do with all this ground? I don't want to mow it all. So
right. Exactly.
I'm going to figure something out here and either, grow some livestock or grow some vegetables or something they can sell and try to make some money there. So I think there's a lot of that going on. But then I think too, a good portion of that is maybe a person owns, whatever that is, 100-acre farm. They don't have interest in farming it themselves. So they, partner with another farmer, a larger farmer, and maybe not necessarily rent them the ground, but do it on a 50-50 share. So they're still considered the farmer on that property. It's just someone else is either custom doing it or they're just getting a share of that crop. So some of that is kind of a technicality that it's, the person owns it and is still engaged in kind of the management aspect, but not actually doing the farming themselves too.
Now you kind of touched on this. As far as profitability, so what is the biggest challenge to the industry?
Man, right now, just cost of everything. It's crazy. Just like everything, I guess, that since COVID and supply chain issues and all that sort of thing, that it is hard to get anything. And if you can get it, it's expensive. So, particularly equipment. I have a good friend that's, works at an equipment dealership here locally. And we were joking all the time that he doesn't have inventory to sell. His job's to sell equipment and they have none to sell. So, or if you do order something new, you're looking at a year out before you get it. And the prices have gone up quite a bit. And, input cost, equipment aside, a grain farmer needs seed, they need fertilizer, they need chemicals to keep the weeds away, things like that. So all of that stuff has really skyrocketed, particularly the fertilizer. And it goes back to, can you even get it? And some of that's kind of worked out here in the last few months. But going back to last winter, moving into this year's growing season, things were kind of hairy. You guys are pretty nervous about getting just what they needed to keep growing a crop.
So because of the economics, are you seeing more things like mega farms? And I know for a while, contract farming was a big deal. In other words, somebody doing the harvesting for you.
I feel like there isn't a lot of that around here. And more so, the contract aspect is in the livestock industry and primarily in Ohio. A lot of we don't have a lot of it in Champaign County, but you go to the west, you get into Darke and Mercer County. There's a lot of poultry barns. There's a lot of hog barns that are probably contracted with another grower, of that large, what you'd think more of as a corporate farm, is, contracted with that farmer to produce pigs for them in that barn. So, but as far as the harvesting goes, there is some of that, but it's more on a smaller scale. Again, that maybe a person has that smaller acreage and just partners with another farmer to come in and just custom harvest for them. But as far as being a large scale thing, it's not like it is. You hear about the harvesting crews that out west that move from Texas up to Canada, just harvesting all across the whole Midwest. And we don't really get into that here. It's just a different environment and field size is much smaller. And there just isn't as much opportunity, I think, for somebody to have a harvesting company like that up here. So, and the weather is so much different. Out west, it's dry all the time. You can just work all the time.
That's a good point.
Here, we have to dance around rain showers and our field conditions right and all that sort of thing. So it's actually much easier for somebody, even if they aren't really that big of a farmer, to still own their own harvesting equipment just to get it done in a timely fashion and not have the crop, be unharvestable.
So in regards to a typical farm, what types of equipment is typically needed?
So I guess to keep in grain production, you need a tractor, you need a planter, you have to get the crop planted, need a combine, got to harvest it somehow, need a way to haul that grain typically. So either, wagons or a semi or whatever. And typically a farm, we'll say 1,000 acres or plus, is going to have a sprayer probably. There are many companies that you can hire to do your spraying for you, but a lot of times the guys have that themselves. So, each of those things, to buy it new and be of any size anymore, you're looking at $500,000.
Wow.
So, you're, easily could have millions of dollars in equipment wrapped up in a farming operation. So, and that's just kind of the bare bones. A lot of these a large farm would have 2 planters or 2 combines or more.
Now, we often talk about the various growing and selling processes involved in meat and produce, but what are some of the in-between processes that are often involved?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies around that are involved in farming. It's our number one industry in Champaign County, so there's a lot of aspects going into that. We have several grain elevators around that are, a guy that grows grain needs a way to sell it, needs somebody to take it. So there's, all those outlets. There's a lot of companies focused on, that crop production aspect that we kind of touched on farmers owning a sprayer there a little bit ago, but there are many companies out there that will do custom spraying, that will do the fertilizer application, that will do the support needed for all of those different things. That, how much fertilizer does a farmer need and in what fields and in what kinds. So companies that are doing the soil sampling, that are doing, doing that application, making those recommendations. And again, the spraying aspect of it can be pretty complex. So a lot of guys will need someone to partner with. And that's kind of where I can fit an extension, but don't always. There's guys that will hire that done, hire a consultant, hire somebody from the co-op or whatever, to come out and give them guidance there, as far as what products they ought to be looking at and how to get that applied, to keep that crop growing the way it should be and hopefully producing, as much as they want.
Often I think we just assume that everything is grown or raised for human consumption. But there are many other uses for the various products in county, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see corn and soybeans, all over the place. And nobody goes to Kroger and buys a bag of soybeans or a bag of corn,
right, exactly.
So, where does all that go and what's it do? There's 2 bigger end users, I guess, so to speak, in the area. Anderson's the Andersons in Greenville is ethanol. So there's a lot of corn that goes over there. A tremendous amount of corn actually, that goes into that. So they're not only producing ethanol, to be mixed with gas, but they're also in turn then selling, their used corn, so to speak, back to livestock producers that feed it then. So, and then Cargill, both in Sidney and in Dayton, buy a lot of grain in this area as well. Sidney is primarily soybeans, and a lot of that goes into just the soybean oil and all the different uses for that. A lot of salad dressing, quite honestly, is made there, or at least kind of the beginning of it and starts there. And then Cargill and Dayton, just corn milling. A lot of that goes to animal feed and pet food too. They have a large, I guess you call it a mill, pet food mill, down in that Dayton area, that goes to all that sort of thing, dog food. So
what would you say has changed the most in farming over the last several decades?
I would say the technology for sure. We have gone from really just in the last 10 to 20 years from having no electronics, I guess, so to speak, in a machine, just a guy, that tractor or combine, just that mechanical aspect of it, getting that job done, to now we have everything's computerized, everything's recorded, yield monitors in the combine that, so many, and it's not just the yield, but it's the yield, it's the moisture, where down to, almost a square inch, and where that information came from is recorded there. So, and even what direction that machine's traveling, there's so many different aspects that are recorded there, and it's all goes back to management then. So, because you can't manage what you don't measure.
Right.
So, and that's what we have, all these different ways of measuring now, basically. And really the biggest jump hasn't necessarily been the development of those technologies or the implementation of those technologies, but what do we do with it? Right. And that's what, because yield monitors have been around for a long time now, but we're really still just getting to the point where we're really delving into using that information to drive decisions for the next year then. And which is what I did a lot when I was at Integrated Ag, and plan on continuing to do now through extensions. So there's a lot of potential there for the digital ag is kind of a term that's thrown around a lot now, and using that information. And we've got drones now that are, doing all kinds of things that are, may even not just collecting the information and taking pictures, but actually making the applications then and spraying and spreading fertilizer, down to specific pinpointed areas. Okay.
Last question for this segment. What has made your job much more challenging?
Back to the technology piece, I guess that it's great. Everything's great when it works. But it's not great when it doesn't. And I think that's what's most frustrating for some growers, is that a lot of times back to like in the combine, there's the machine part of it that actually does the job. And then there's the electronic part of it that's sometimes controlling the machine and sometimes just recording what's going on. And if that electronic part fails, it's really frustrating.
I'll bet
to either myself or to a grower. And so how do you get around that? Just try to keep on top of things. And what's particularly frustrating is this is all tied to GPS, right? You have to have GPS to know where what's happened. So if you lose that GPS signal, then everything kind of falls apart.
I see.
So, and that's what is particularly frustrating to a guy that's sitting in the field. There's no reason why he shouldn't be able to keep going other than he can't get a GPS signal. So it can be kind of, like I say, pretty frustrating.
In the second segment, I'd like to talk more about the specific types of farming in Champaign County and some of the processes, programs, and initiatives available to help promote the industry. We'd like to take this time to remind our listeners that all of True Chat's podcasts help pursue a common goal: to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations and information. To learn more about Mercy Moments, listen to the recap at the end of the program, and to search for previous episodes or find ways to listen, please visit us at mercymoments.org. Are you in need of medical imaging services? Then look no further, for Mercy Health Urbana Hospital and its newly renovated Imaging and Women's Center now offers everything from CT, MRI, and ultrasound to DEXA, and yes, even 3D mammography. Also, our team of board-certified radiologists will work with your prescriber to provide accurate and timely results. To learn more about medical imaging services, please visit us at mercy.com. Welcome back. So our topic today has been about agriculture, and specifically in Champaign County. And our guest today has been Grant Davis. Grant, welcome back.
Thank you.
So from doing the show for several years, I'm always amazed by how intricate and complex many of our topics really are. For example, I think that many people would just assume that farming is nothing more than, planting seeds and feeding livestock. But there's a lot more that actually goes into running a successful farm, correct?
Absolutely.
For example, there's a lot of research involved. So can you talk a little bit more about like on farming and e-fields and e-barns and things like that?
Sure. So in extension, that's a lot of what we focus on is the research aspect. We found that is where we fit very well, that even a lot of the consultants as well as farmers rely on the information that we're putting out as far as research goes to know, what products are actually worthwhile to a farmer. There's a lot of term that's thrown around is called snake oil, that anybody can put something in a jug and
Right.
market it to a farmer and say, this is going to make your crop grow better. But does it really? And so that's where extension fits. So E-Fields started in 2017, I believe, was the first year. And that was our big push to try to get some of the research out faster. Traditionally, on-farm research would be done, and we try to get multiple years of the same trial and have those replications and kind of that more traditional research aspect, which is good. And we're still doing that, and there's still a place for that. But we found that farmers, they want to know sooner than they don't want to wait on a 3 or 5 year study.
Right.
They want to know right away what's good, what's bad.
Right.
So that's kind of where the E-Fields fits. It's more of a single year focus, and hey, here's what we went out and did. Sometimes it's more of a traditional research, and having different reps of a product or something. And sometimes it's even just more exploratory and like, hey, here's this different method of doing something. We're just going to go try it. Here's what we found. I mean, there may not be actual data tied to that, but it's just, did it work or not in general? And then brand new for this year is actually the E-Barns, which is along the same lines, but from the livestock industry aspect in, what works, a different feed formulation or maybe a different feed additive, manure use. Can we, the traditional aspect of manure is you just get rid of it, right? Go spread it in the field. But there's a lot of nutrient value there.
Right, exactly.
And can we manage our nutrient placement a little bit better using manure from that? So there's a lot of different topics about manure and E-Barns, and we're going to look at that to grow here in the next couple of years or coming future. Like I say, it's brand new for this year, and hopefully that'll keep getting bigger.
Now, you touched on a little bit about the extension land grant program. So how does that work?
So not to get too much of a history lesson, I guess, but that goes back to 1862. The Morrill Act established land grant institutions, which is what Ohio State is. Basically, that just provides one college or university that should focus on agriculture and mechanics.
Interesting.
And that's what, it was really Ohio A&M, way back when. And that, kind of changed into Ohio State University as we know it now. So then we talked about research. In 1887, the Hatch Act started the research leg of that we should also have research farms that are part of the university and also, get support from the state to try to, better agriculture in the state. And then 1914, the Smith-Lever Act established extension to basically be just what it describes, that extension of the university out into communities at the county level. So theoretically, there should be an extension office with hopefully an A&R educator like myself out in every county in the state. And that's grown into not only ag and natural resources, but 4-H. So there's a 4-H program in every county, and family and consumer sciences, and some have a community development educator as well.
That's a good point. You guys get local support as well, correct?
Our funding comes from various different levels, but a lot of it comes from the local level, from the county commissioners. So, and we're blessed here in the county to have strong support from the commissioners, and we always are grateful for a way to mention that and say that we're glad to have that. So just another reason why local elections are important, that, there's a lot of times that people don't realize what county commissioners even do. And that is one major aspect that, they dole out all the county's money pretty much, and decide what programs get what and to what extent. So, we're blessed to have some strong support from them.
So how did a lot of the farms in Champaign County get started? And by that, I mean, did they get passed down from generation to generation or what?
Yeah, a lot of times I think that's the normal, I guess, so to speak, way of that transition. It is interesting here in Champaign County that there are several, multi-generation farms that some have even been active in farming since Champaign County has existed. I mean, it's gone back that far. So, which is really kind of unique. I don't have that number, but it'd be interesting to know, like in the state, how many farms have really been around that long. But yeah, there's several around, and I think that's kind of the typical way of a farm just gets passed down from generation to generation. Not always, but it happens, more often than not.
So have you seen, consolidation of farms, or has that number actually increased?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the number of farms has increased, kind of back to what we talked about earlier, that, it's pretty easy to be considered a farm.
Right, exactly.
So that number has grown. But if you look at strictly, commercial grain farming, which is what we have a lot of here in the county, that number has actually decreased. So we talked about the amount of small farms earlier, but if you look at the amount of farms that are actually 1,000 acres or more, there's only 47, at least according to the 2017 Census of Agriculture. So, that's not many, obviously.
Right, exactly.
So, and so I think we go back to that passing down from generation to generation. And what happens a lot is that, okay, dad's farming, son wants to be involved. There maybe isn't really enough to go around to support two families then. So we need to expand. And
right,
how do we do that? Either we buy more ground, or we rent more ground, or maybe the neighbor down the road is going to retire here in the next year or two. Maybe there's an opportunity there. So then, that neighbor has how many acres he has, that gets absorbed by this other farm so that the son can be a part of it. So, and that grows and grows and grows. So there could be those multi-generations we talked about. There could be 3 to 5 families all in the same operation that are, all working together, which is really pretty cool. But it does take that consolidation to happen, though. And
that's a good point. So what are some of the demographics of the typical farmer in Champaign County?
Stereotypical, everybody thinks of, a white guy in his bibs and is chewing on his piece of straw as a farmer. But, and I think that's probably a lot of what we have are white males. But there are getting to be a lot more women involved. We talked about that, the multi-generational aspect and many families working together. There's a lot that involve the wife or the daughter. It always was thought of, it's the sons that are going to take over in farming. And we're seeing that's not necessarily the case anymore.
Right.
And I think back to, the technology aspect of it too, that, farming is less physical than what it used to be. It's still hard work. It's still long hours, and there's a physical aspect to it. But a lot of it is just operating machinery. And there's nothing that says a woman can't do that. So, there are many women farmers as well, either operating the farm, solely themselves, or as part of, that multi-family unit running a farm.
Now, we talked about, how there's a lot of cropland. So naturally, many of the farms are growing things like wheat and corn and soybeans. But what other types of produce do we see grown here locally?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, actually, that we're try to get my statistics right. If you look at aquaculture in that we mentioned that Census of Ag, Champaign County is ranked 3rd in Ohio in aquaculture.
Interesting.
And as well as 3rd in Ohio in vegetable, melons, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. So that's really pretty interesting because we, like I say, we think of grain primarily is what we see, but there are still some really interesting different aspects of agriculture that are happening just right here in our doorstep. So we do have one larger grower in that produce section. I think potatoes and green beans primarily is what they're doing. And then the aquaculture aspect, we do have one really pretty good sized grower that is involved with aquaculture and has a very good presence in the community and has a big festival in the fall and all that. So it's kind of a unique situation, I guess, that we have here, that we do have those different aspects as well as the more of the traditional aspects of farming.
You bring up a good point, because in the first segment, we talked a little bit about some of the in-between processes, and all those unique or hybrid farms require some kind of in-between process. So can you talk about some of those that companies that are in Champaign County?
Every livestock producer, needs to have that a place to sell their product, and that's going to be meat in some way. So we have, processing, animal processing and that kind of stuff that we need to have that done. We mentioned the aquaculture, that it is a unique aspect, but they almost take that into their own hands, that they also have to do their own marketing. They have to do their own, get that product out and to the consumer.
Right.
And way to go. So that's kind of I guess the interesting aspect of some of the more non-traditional things, that you have to take that into your own hands, and you're kind of, it's, vertically integrated, I guess, to throw that term out there, that you have to be that way to get your product and in turn make any money from it. So,
and you kind of touched on the marketing aspect. So you guys have moved to have a more like direct to consumer relationship in county, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of that goes on. Like I say, the fish aspect, and then there's a lot of the smaller producers, the smaller farms we mentioned. Some of them are more of the, they have that, 5 or 10 acres or more, that what are we going to do with it? So we're going to raise some cattle, or we're going to raise some pigs or some chickens, or maybe all those things, and look at selling the eggs. We're going to sell the meat, all that sort of stuff right to the consumer. So I think that's something that since COVID has really gotten more interest, because people remember going to the grocery store during COVID and there's no meat in the freezer there.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, well, where can I get it locally? And that was already kind of starting to happen anyway, that there's been just in the last, 5-10 years, that more of a focus in doing things locally, particularly how do we get our food locally, and trying to be more healthy, but also more green, that we're not, there's a lot of traditionally cattle are hauled to a big processing plant, maybe in Iowa, and then are processed and then hauled back out to all the grocery stores, in the country. And so it's all this food traveling around on semi-truck. It needs to happen. There's a reason it happens that way for the most part. But I think there is that growing interest in, we don't need to be a part of that. How can we support our local people right here, and in turn, maybe get a higher quality product, and that's potentially healthier. It's potentially healthier for the environment, and is just, better in general.
Now, fall's usually a pretty busy time for you guys, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's grain harvest. We talked about the research aspect. That is something that takes some time. You have to be conscientious as we're harvesting to make sure we're harvesting our strips right, I guess, so to speak, and getting those whatever products we may have tested to get that information collected correctly, so we know, is our research doing anything, and then just the general harvest, of getting that crop in, a lot of that going on. But a lot of the things that people don't think about is not only the combines harvesting and then the semis hauling that grain away. On the drive over here, I passed a fertilizer spreader going down the road. So as that crop comes off, fertilizer is being spread for next year's crop. Probably soil samples are being taken, and kind of in conjunction with that fertilizer spreading. We talk about spraying, and normally we think about killing weeds, in that growing crop. But really the first part of that starts in the fall. There's a lot of spraying that actually happens in the fall, just to kind of have that clean slate moving into next year too.
Well, you talked about research, and we really haven't touched on this too much. What are some of the educational resources and other training available in the area?
Sure. So just like everything, I hate to always point people to a website, but that's where a lot of our information is housed anymore. There's a lot of different resources available through OSU on the internet. Just go.osu.edu. Get to extension. There's so many different segments of, whatever you're looking for, whether it's ag crops, whether it's beef, swine, sheep, poultry, farm management. There's a big emphasis here lately on farm management, because we feel like that's a good area where we fit, that there's a need in the state and here locally too, that, guys are looking for support in, how do I manage the business aspect of farming, and, all the taxes involved, and, and we talked about that multi-generational aspect. How do I do that legally and make it make sense for all parties involved. You know, we can't just, okay, well, grandpa's going to give it to dad and dad's going to give it to me. Well, okay, but grandpa may have to go to a nursing home, and how are we going to pay for that if he doesn't have any, you know, resources now because he passed that on? So, you know, that sort of stuff, guys are looking for that type of information. So we're trying to provide that as a university.
Well, that pretty much does it for the program today. And we always like to end the program with something that we like to call Caring Corner. November is Awareness Month for several important health issues, the first of which being diabetes. And like the American Diabetes Association, Mercy Health would like to remind you that there are resources out there available to help fight this disease, with ultimately the goal being to reduce the burden of diabetes and improve the lives of those living with the condition. Also, November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, which unfortunately is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States. Fortunately, however, there are now processes in place to help screen for this disease, which usually means meeting certain criteria and talking it over with your prescriber. In addition, many insurances now even cover those who qualify. Finally, Mercy Health would like to remind everyone that November is COPD Awareness Month, and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, or NHLBI, states that not only is smoking a leading cause of lung cancer, but of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease as well, and that it strongly encourages people to quit smoking. To learn more about all of these initiatives, please visit us at www.mercy.com. We'd like to end the program today by reminding everyone that our goal here at Mercy Moments is to promote local resources, awareness, and involvement. Therefore, if you have any comments related to past episodes or have suggestions for future programs, please contact us at taceyler@mercy.com. That's capital TACEYLER@mercy.com. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Grant Davis, for being here. You can listen to Mercy Moments on TrueChat via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or anywhere else fine podcasts are found. For Mercy Moments, Mercy Health Urbana Hospital, and TrueChat, I'm your host, T. Allen Ceyler.
I'm Grant Davis.
Thanks for listening today. Stay healthy, Ohio.